Not, I mean, it's not really our place to announce big game support news. That's up to the developers. We can't steal their thunder. So if there's big game news to be announced, then you'll hear it from the game developer.
The developers, yeah. The HD prototypes, we probably won't build too many more. And
there's
really,
a tiny number of devs that have them, but they're people who have been involved with us like before the Kickstarter that have really helped put the whole Rift together. And they don't have them, just to make games for. It's because they're actually really helpful in terms of improving our consumer product.
Yeah, the challenge is really manufacturing something like that at scale where we can give them to all the developers that we'd like to have them is just too time consuming and sort of a distraction from the consumer product. So we want to just have enough that we can get that feedback from the critical devs that we really need it, and we'll just keep going as fast as we can to the consumer version, which is really what everyone wants. I'm looking forward to a lot of things. I think we have a lot of exciting news planned. Yeah, we have a lot of exciting news planned. We're working on a lot of different stuff that we're excited to share. Some of it, we wanted to bring to Gamescom, for example, but it's just not quite ready for prime time, and we don't want to show anything that's too half-baked. So I think, again, there's a lot to look forward to. Not all of it we can talk about today.
Everything?
Yeah, it's hard.
Wizardry?
It's hard to measure John's influence on Oculus, especially today when it's just starting. But, John was an integral part of the project early on with kicking this thing off at E3. And it was really, a lot of that brilliance and his credibility and his experience and sort of vision that drove all that excitement back at E3 2012. Yes. So today, John is both an expert in computer graphics, game engines, but also you would be blown away by the amount of knowledge he has on the hardware side of things and sort of the innovation that he's bringing to the table in terms of new ideas for things that we should be trying, some of which we hadn't even thought about yet. So, and when it comes to display technology, the same thing. I mean, John is just, we really couldn't think of a better CTO, and the more we talked about it with John and, ourselves, it was just the perfect match for Oculus, I think. John's vision, I think, matches ours, if not exceeding it, in terms of the possibilities for VR and the things he wants to accomplish and he wants Oculus to accomplish. And again, I think that's why, that enthusiasm and that drive mixed with that amount of talent is something that is so rare that we're really, really, really lucky to have him on board. Don't know yet. We're hiring. I mean, we have a lot of job postings out. I think
we've already hired a couple people there.
We've already hired a couple people for the office. Matt Hooper, former creative director at id, who's super talented, is working with John out of that office. There's a couple other guys who, I don't know if they've been announced yet, are joining the team down there. So we'll be building a small office in that space, but it's yet to be decided. It depends a bit on what we decide to do down there. We're experimenting with a couple different projects, and we want to see which one we want to run with first.
Better hardware, higher frame rates. Software cannot fix it. There's no sweet spot. As high as you can possibly go. I mean, I'd say that like 120 hertz is a spot where most consumer grade hardware is at least theoretically capable of driving games at that frame rate, and it's also a lot of artifacts become a lot less perceptible at that, but it's hard to say exactly where the sweet spot is.
Are there any tweaks you can do in the software? So like motion blur?
Not really. It's mainly a hardware issue.
I mean,
there are things you can do wrong in software that make it worse, but there's nothing you can really do in software that can fix that problem. No, it will not completely eliminate nausea. It'll help in a lot of cases, and it will reduce a lot of the mismatch in cues that you get. But just like there's a lot of things that make people sick in real life, there will always be things that make people sick in virtual reality. Even if we made hardware that absolutely perfectly replicated how we perceive reality, there will still be experiences that make people sick. VR doesn't mean that people magically can do whatever they want and ignore the limits of the human body. Yes,
Yeah.
we're building that up over time. In fact, we gave a talk at GDC Europe just a couple days ago that talked about exactly some of those issues.
Yeah. We're working on a best practices guide for the community. It's actually partially written by the community based on what's been working in the developer forums and what feedback we've been getting. So that's going to come out pretty soon. But it really is one of the things we said in our talk is that the rule book, there is no rule book. There's no guidebook. Even our best practices guide is just a draft of what we think works today. And I'm sure half of it will be wrong, half of it still needs more experimentation, but the point is to start somewhere and to give developers an idea of, hey, we know this probably doesn't work yet, or generally is a bad practice, and let us know what you think, and experiment with it and find out. And that'll continue to evolve over time. It's not a hard and fast, here are the rules, here's how you do it right. It's more like, here's a guidebook, here's some guidelines to follow and ideas that to think about and things to keep in mind.
Try it.
I've not tried that particular headset, no.
How do you feel about their approach to high FOV virtual reality?
I've built headsets exactly like that. I've built triple panel, I've even built quad panel HMDs. Yeah, so it was one panel for each eye plus two panels that had off-axis rendered views for your periphery. And those went all the way to 270-degree plus fields of view. The biggest issue is that using canted panels causes a lot of optical artifacts from field curvature to distortion. And in theory, I've seen them talk about how it's not an issue. In theory, it isn't if optics behaved perfectly in terms of they actually collimate light exactly how they're supposed to, but optics aren't perfect. They're not even close to perfect. That's why you have to correct for their distortion and stuff like this. So it's an interesting idea, but it's, aside from the optical problems also, it weighs a lot more, it's more expensive. It's very, very difficult to get those the two images synced because either A, you have to come up with some custom video protocol where you're taking both frames, sending them over a single video output, and then decoding them on the side of the headset, or you need to use two video outputs. And a lot of people don't even have two video outputs, much less two spare video outputs. And Windows in particular does a very poor job of keeping those outputs synchronized, especially with most consumer graphics cards. Exactly, you're going to have the frames are out of sync, and that can cause a lot of problems for many people. Yeah. There are some professional cards, like the NVIDIA Quadro cards, that let you gen lock the two outputs together so that they're perfectly in sync, but those are only on their professional cards. You can't do that on any of their consumer gaming cards.
So it's been a year since you guys the Kickstarter kicked off. There are no proper pretenders to your throne at the moment. Would you say that the next year... The next year is going to be kind of yeah, exactly. The next year is going to be sort of we're going to see a lot more.
I think so. I'll let you answer, Palmer. Sure. I will say I think so. I think that we'll see more and more coming, and we're excited because the prospect of more developers building VR games, that's at the heart of all of this. Like even the Rift is not a compelling experience without great software, and so if we can get more developers believing that VR is coming, which we obviously believe through and through, then that's awesome.
I would also say that it is much harder to make a high-performance consumer-facing virtual reality headset than people think. There's a lot of people that have been working on these. It is even harder than people think. A lot of people. They know that over the past decades, people have been working on it and building very expensive professional-grade gear. And then they hear, well, wait a sec, this makes sense. Sensors are better, mobile screens are better. Well, you just slap it all together and you make that into a head-mounted display. But it's actually, there's so many difficult problems on the manufacturing side, the calibration side, the engineering side, that I think a lot of people are maybe not really aware of how difficult it is to put something together. So I think we're going to see people working on other stuff, but I do think that Oculus is going to stay out front. I don't think anybody is on track to make anything better than what we're making.
I think a big part of that comes down to the team that we brought together.
We have the best team. We're going to make the best headset. And that's it.
It's bold statements, but...
I like bold statements.
I think there hopefully is. I mean, what we want, obviously, is the best consumer experience, or the best user experience, right? So that anyone that drops into VR that is interested in VR gaming can jump in. And having a unified approach is obviously the best for the user. So It's hard to say, though.
Well, the counterpoint to that is it's good to have standards, but right now we're the only people out there. So people are like, well, why don't you make your thing an open standard? It's like, well, there's nobody else that can work with our software yet anyways. Why would we want to do that? Especially because building a standard, if we're going to make a standard for people, you need to know what features it's supposed to have. And we're not even done with our consumer product. You can't build a standard around, you know, all these different VR features if you don't even know what VR features are possible to do or what the best thing to do is. But I do think that eventually we're going to have to see something like that.
I hope so.
Yes.
That would be an exciting time.